Storytime Journal. Yay! Okay, so this is called Mrs. Esposito's Pizza. Things Are Seldom What They Seem by Greta B. Lipson. Victor was always comfortable going back to his old neighborhood. And this is what kind of a sketch, like a urban New Yorkish style neighborhood. Victor was always comfortable going back to his old neighborhood. He never made it a secret that he grew up there. Indeed, it was his badge of honor. In no way was he ashamed of his humble beginnings, nor was he embarrassed about his determined trip out of the place. As a matter of fact, he now felt pride over his present status. He loved being rich and successful. Who wouldn't? Victor couldn't explain it, but there was always this need to go back to the streets of his youth. Perhaps it reaffirmed his authenticity and made him a better person, one whose affluence, that's richness, had not spoiled him. Victor was fond of saying, "You can take the boy out of the slum, but you can't take the slum out of the boy." And he probably said it in a more New York accent than I just did. All right, the familiar sights were reassuring to him. Of course, there were some changes over the years, but many of the storefronts were just as he remembered them. He relished the pungent smells, the ragtag people, the jumbled merchandise, the sounds, and the spicy ethnic treats. Unlike the way he lived as a deprived child, he was now able to buy absolutely anything that appealed to his palate. That fact of life was a lasting joy to his stomach. No more unfulfilled yearning for him. He could afford to have it all. And there's kind of his little, he's kicking back, all dressed all nice and rich like. The daily newspaper made a big thing about developers who were gentrifying the neighborhood. Okay, now it's going to tell you what gentrifying is. Making it more attractive for the young professionals who were moving in. But he wasn't worried about any serious inroads into the look and feel of the place. The new residents would surely consider it important to protect the old flavor of the streets and the shops. They would glory in its vintage, and it would forever be his old neighborhood. Easing his Mercedes, that's right, his Mercedes, easing it against the curb in a clearly marked no parking zone, Victor began to review mentally the tasty choices which would appear on the menu over the backboard. Double pepperoni? Absolutely. Anchovies? Too salty. But they made the thirst-quenching soda pop, you can tell he's from the north, so acutely delicious. Olives? You said it. He imagined black olives looking up at him like cartoon circles unblinking in a sea of bubbly, aromatic tomato sauce. I love that sentence, right? What a great simile, using like or as, like cartoon circles, unblinking in a sea of bubbly, aromatic tomato sauce. This is the way this author's chosen to describe the black olives, the round black olives on a pizza. As usual, his choice would be an Esposito special. His stomach was sending messages to his brain, which was generating even more fantasies. He rehearsed the very first slice of pizza, cut adrift in space, separated from its crispy moorings. He envisioned warm, attenuated strings of mozzarella cheese hanging on, right? You can see it. Then disengaged, finally finding their way up to his eager lips. You know how cheese stretches? That's attenuated. That's a fancy word for it. It always happened this way. It never ceased to amaze him that thoughts of food could cause a rush of saliva. So he was like drooling. He was like one of Pavlov's psychologically conditioned dogs. Remember Pavlov was the scientist that trained dogs to salivate when he rang a bell because he would feed them every time like he rang the bell, so they associated it with food and began to salivate. Anyway, he was like that with this pizza. Esposito's pizza. All it took was one thought of that pizza, and a great surge of saliva filled his mouth in readiness for the feast. Once inside Esposito's, he gave the deliberate order of an aficionado. An aficionado is someone who knows everything about everything, and hung over the counter longingly. He would play a time game with himself while he waited patiently for the oven to give up its wondrous baked delight. Finally, the pizza was pulled from the hearth, was lovingly dusted with hot peppers, and was packaged. Victor smelled that fragrance, which was at once a mix of an oregano cloud and a hot cardboard box. You know that smell. Almost at the very moment he stepped out of the store, he felt a presence behind him. "Stop right there, bozo, and don't even think about turning around." He clutched his outside pizza box as if he were a rigid sentry standing watch. Victor felt an insistent, unmistakable object thrust painfully into his ribs. A gun. Somebody was actually holding him up in front of a busy pizza joint. Where was everybody at supper time anyway? He'd heard stories about the physical sensations people experience when in a state of fright. Can you really vomit on an empty stomach? He wondered. Good question. He repressed a whimper, but was horrified when a pathetic sound escaped. What'd you say? His assailant was anxious. What'd you say? His assailant was anxious. Sorry. Then, not waiting for an answer, the guy with the gun threatened, "Just shut up, bozo." A beseeching voice came out of Victor's throat. "You can take anything I've got," he ventured. Was that piping voice actually his? He actually realized he couldn't control it as it rambled on. The snickered response was predictable. "I don't need no look from you, bozo." Victor quickly inventoried the worldly goods on his body. He had a Count Dulaine leather coat, and this is him kind of surprised, a serpentine gold chain around his neck, a diamond initial ring, and those are big, the initial rings like have your initials, anyway. A diamond initial ring, let's see, and a brand new imported watch. That watch was his baby, his status symbol, like think Rolex, like the Rolex you've been saving up for. He clung to the pizza as a toddler would to a blanket, the warmth of it heating his numbed belly. And the toddler to the blanket, again, is a simile, using like grass. The rest happened quickly. With a dancer's grace, the mugger pulled the gun out of Victor's ribs, did an astonishing pirouette, whirled in front of him, and looked into Victor's eyes, full face. With one brutal wrench, the thug tore at Victor's frozen hands, whipped his wrists, and pulled away his prize. He took off down the street at breakneck speed with coattails flying, like a western duster on a frontier bad guy. The hapless Victor watched disbelieving as the hoodlum disappeared from sight like a phantom streak. Shaken, almost insensible from fright, Victor lurched in a half faint, dropping to the pavement on one knee. The curb broke his fall and gave him meager comfort as he sat with his head buried in his arms. He sobbed uncontrollably. "Oh, thank you, God," he slobbered. "I can't believe it. I'm still alive. That idiot left everything I had worth stealing, and all he took was my pizza." So, that's the tale of the twist. He had all these gold chains and everything, and the guy ended up stealing the pizza. That's how good Mrs. Esposito's pizza is. So, some of the questions that you can answer one of these or all of these. Just tell me what you thought of the story. But here's some questions you can answer for journal. Is the mugger less a thief for having stolen a pizza worth a few dollars instead of robbing Victor of his watch or gold chain, which were worth a fortune? So do you think if you steal something that's like a pizza, is that not really as bad as stealing something like a watch or a gold chain? Second, a misdemeanor is defined as a minor crime usually punishable by less than 1 year in jail and or a fine. Quote. What factor is there in this incident that would make it more serious? So what is it that would make the crime more serious that appeared in the story? Or you could answer, why do you think someone would risk the possible penalty of armed robbery? Ooh, that gave away the answer number 2. Armed robbery, if convicted, just to grab something to eat. What is the reason that people commit crimes in general? Statistics indicate that more crimes are committed by young people than by older people. What would you say are the reasons for this? So those are some interesting, just outside questions connected to the story you could answer. Why do you think most people commit crimes? And then why do you think more younger people commit crimes than older people? And then finally, where would you go if you were homeless and needed a meal to keep body and soul together? And most of you would probably know the answer to this, just like I do. I know where the soup kitchens and shelters are. But think about world hunger and how you would solve that. That's what that last question is asking is, what would you do to kind of solve someone who would go to this length to get a pizza? Or maybe it was just really good pizza. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed our little story. Thank you so much for listening. And I will post this with where you can read it if you need a visual. Okay, thank you. I miss you guys.